Without further ado, we would like to welcome back Carly Krakow to tell us about some current events.
To see you, Bassam and MK.
We should say that this is a sort of a new segment that literally addresses whatever Carly wants to address.
We have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth.
Yes, going to keep you guessing and leave some wiggle room with that, expansive description. Really, anything goes. But yeah, excited for this still pretty new segment to be back with you for this month's installment of the catch up on international current affairs. And there is obviously so much to discuss. So let's catch up on some international news. And you guys can hear me okay, right? I think there was a delay for a moment, but now I think we're good.
Yes, you're good.
Awesome. Okay. So, yeah, I'm just going to work backwards chronologically through four things in the monster of a month that was January. So, first, just this week, the former first son in law, the so called peacemaker extraordinaire, Jared Kushner, has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I have to say, this does not warrant much discussion in its own right. It's pretty absurd. I'm sure most of our audience would agree with that. But because of that, and there has been a lot of chatter about it, I just did want to note that the number of people who are eligible to nominate anyone for the Peace Prize is not a very exclusive list. A huge number of academics and representatives of governments and institutions. So for those watching who heard that or have been hearing that and panicked a bit, you can calm down. Nothing major has happened yet, other than I guess we have more fodder for now for jokes to make about Kushner, who was actually nominated apparently by the pro-Trump lawyer Alan Dershowitz for the several normalization agreements with Israel that Kushner helped broker as part of Trump's so-called deal of the century. And we've talked about how we've had experts on this show before to talk about the fact that one, these agreements were a transparent attempt to further unjustly push Palestinians out of decision making. And two, these agreements don't really change much from a practical standpoint. The UAE, for example, and others have quietly cooperated with Israel for years, as we know. So I interviewed Ilan Pape about this back in October. Bassam and MK, you also had Nora Arakat on in December. So I'll talk more about Trump versus Biden on Middle East policy in a moment, but this is just a chance to reflect quickly in an interesting way, I think, on the broader history of the Nobel Prizes and the not so short list of frankly terrible things associated with the prizes throughout the years. So one example, 1949, the Nobel Prize in Physiology is awarded to the physician who first developed the lobotomy, which we know today is an extremely dangerous and unethical procedure. Another winner in 1945, the Secretary of State under President Franklin Roosevelt was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for helping to establish the UN, but turns out history would reveal that he also engineered the refusal to receive a large number of Jewish refugees who arrived by ship from Germany in 1939. And this guy was the one who told FDR that if you accept these refugees, I will make sure I and my colleagues don't support you in the next election. So all of those people were sent back to Hitler's Germany, and more than a quarter of them died under Nazi rule. So we could keep going, but just to give you a glimpse, the list is long. And I think the takeaway here is just to remain critical, as ASI does so well, of what is celebrated in the moment by the public and especially by large institutions, because as we know, history often does not look very kindly on these celebrations as more information is revealed over time. But with Kushner, of course, I think we already have plenty of information to go on right now. So moving on, next up, second, last month I talked about what we might expect from the new Biden administration and the fact that this was a time for cautious hope and also healthy skepticism that continues to motivate activism. So I think we've seen all that come to fruition with the latest news on U.S. policy regarding Yemen. The Biden administration has imposed a temporary freeze on weapons sales to Saudi Arabia and the UAE worth billions, and Secretary of State Tony Blinken in his first press conference addressed the situation, calling it, as we've known for a long time, the world's worst humanitarian crisis. But I want to emphasize that this weapons freeze is only temporary. So advocacy on behalf of Yemeni civilians and demands that Saudi Arabia be held accountable very much continue and need to continue. On Palestine, the Biden administration has said they support the Abraham Accords, the normalization deals I just mentioned that were established under Trump. So that's not shocking news at all, but still concerning. At the same time, they have promised to resume U.S. aid to Palestine. Hopefully, this will include UNRWA, the Palestine Refugee Agency, which regardless will face a funding shortfall after Trump terminated UNRWA aid. So yeah, just going to one more category with that. On climate, there have been some legitimately promising initial developments, halting the Keystone XL pipeline, pausing oil and gas leasing on public lands and waters, and directing federal agencies to end at least a portion of subsidies for fossil fuels, which is all a start. But as expected, we're seeing this push and pull in different directions between some of the bleeding stopping from the gaping wounds that the Trump administration had created and many positive steps forward, but also this looming risk of slippage back into dangerous old normals in many ways. So lots to keep tab on there in coming months. Third, we're just packing it all in. There was, of course, the horrendous attack at the US Capitol on January 6th, which now already seems like a year ago. But there's still so much unfolding about how Republican leaders were strategically involved in the facilitation of this and to what extent. Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, famously called for trial by combat on the morning of the insurrection. And as numerous people who participated in the attack have been arrested so far, we'll see in the months ahead what true accountability there will be for Republican leaders. But the thing that has stuck with me in recent weeks is the importance of pushing back against these refrains we heard from a lot of commentators of how could this happen here? How could this happen in the United States? You know, this is something that happens abroad. This is something that happens in the Middle East, right? Not here. And I think we have to remember that Trump was just the latest iteration of a long, long history of racism and violence in this country that has been exported abroad, notably, of course, with devastating consequences throughout the region. So continue to follow that one as well. And then to conclude, I want to show an image that I think we're definitely all familiar with by now. There we go. I think that's up on the screen. So it is many images, actually, of U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, or Amo Bernie, as some of us might refer to him, looking, I would say, appropriately unfazed, to say the least, by the pomp and circumstance of the inauguration. He showed up, he did his due diligence, and then he got back to work. What was interesting about this was not only the very many amusing memes that came out for those, you know, from those and for those, I guess, who are already sold on Bernie and the important work he does and kind of his whole vibe there. But the way the Democratic establishment, I think, was pretty willing to lean into the joke and celebrated what they now seem to want to see and be willing to see as amusing old Uncle Bernie. And I think what we're seeing there is that it's easy for centrist figures to laugh with someone when they're no longer perceived as a major threat to the presidency. So I just take that as a reminder for those who have already long challenged the problematic policies of the Democratic Party to keep doing that important work. Bernie has great mittens, but there's so much he stands for when it comes to holding this new administration accountable, and he still has a very strong platform from which to do that. And I love to see Bernie, at least in meme form, in Palestine, at the educational bookshop in Jerusalem, and smoking some shisha there to put smiles on our faces. So that was a whirlwind of information, but we'll have a summary in the digest as well, in case you want to follow up any further. And then I will look forward to catching up with you all next month again. I don't think I can hear you.
We were
guys.
muted. Sorry. Thanks, Carly.
Is it me?
We're looking forward to your next edition, and I am sure there'll be a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
Yes, speed talking will be the challenge.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great to
Susan.
see you,
Thanks,
Carly.
Take care.
Bye.